Hello, hello. I hope y'all are doing well. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Just tell me if this gets too weird. I'm getting married in like 10 weeks from the time of this recording. And I have to tell you, not obsessing over my body, my weight, my dress size has been such a freeing feeling. Like this burden has been lifted. And my wish, like one of my wishes, is that every woman could just have this sort of freedom and acceptance on her wedding day if she chooses to get married. And just freedom and acceptance of our bodies in general is just such a gift. And one of the main obstacles to this freedom and acceptance is diet culture. And today I want to talk through how to break up with diet culture because it's not as easy as it seems. If you read any research that proves diets don't work, in fact, 95% of them fail in the long term. And actually, dieting can cause us to get fatter in the long term by increasing our body's set point range. When you read that, you'll likely agree that diet culture is toxic and harmful to your life. Intellectually, you'll believe that anyway. If you read intuitive eating or any of the health at every size research, you'll start to get a bit ragey at all the lies we were told. These lies were in the air we breathed, and unlearning them sounds like it should be straightforward because we see how much diet culture hurts us, how much pain it causes us. So of course, if we just want to get rid of it and allow ourselves unconditional permission to eat, of course we want to delete all of our food rules from our brains. Of course we see that as healing. We want to learn to attune to our body's hunger, fullness, and satisfaction cues. We want to get rid of the too small clothes and find clothes we love that fit our bodies and boost our confidence. We want to move on from this obsession and soak up every moment we get of this one precious life. We want all of that, right? Well, the truth is, a part of us wants all of that, but another part of us doesn't. And today I want to talk about that other part of us that doesn't want to let go of diet culture. We'll talk about why that is and how to navigate that part of us so that we actually can finally break up with diet culture and live our GD lives already. As people, but women especially, who grew up in kind of the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, we were implicitly and explicitly told many messages. Lots of them were damaging. One particularly destructive main message was that as women especially, appearance and attractiveness makes you more valuable. Of course, this isn't true. Think of the most important, most valuable people in your lives. I think about my mom, my son, my sisters, my friends, my fiance, and I care very little about what they look like. It's all the other stuff that is so much more important to me, that make them so much more valuable to my life. How they treat others, how they treat themselves. But we were told that our attractiveness makes us more valuable to society, specifically the dominant culture in our society, which happens to be cisgender, heterosexual white men. And because of this most powerful group, powerful in that they house the most control and influence in our society, their qualification of what is valuable was subconsciously learned to women in all marginalized groups as more important just because of that power structure. Placing our innate human value on our appearance is one majorly destructive way to take away any person's power. However, the next level message we got was, or should I say is, that attractiveness is equal to thinness and also whiteness, but that's another podcast for another day. So fat was prescribed all these negative connotations and associations about people's character, even though body fat has nothing to do with character. Associations like they're lazy, they're gluttonous, and the most highly valued quality in our Western, predominantly Christian culture is that they don't have self-control. Self-control has been deemed this morally virtuous, righteous quality that separates highly valuable people with low-value people. Just saying these words out loud makes me queasy, but here we are. So to sum up, again, these are generalizations, I know, but if you identify as a woman, your human value is generally attributed to your attractiveness, which is attributed to your thinness. And there are absolute privileges for thin, conventionally, quote, attractive white women. So this isn't just a made-up narrative. These are systems there are systems in place that reinforce this fat-phobic discrimination. All of this is to say, of course we desire to be thin. Of course we desire to be attractive. We think our worth depends on it, whether that's subconsciously or sometimes consciously. This is where diet culture exploits those already marginalized by these narratives and cultural belief systems. Diet culture tells us that thinness, i.e. attractiveness, i.e. human value, is absolutely attainable if you just restrict and control your diet enough and exercise enough. That's it. Calories in, calories out, right? No, that's just wrong. Just so wrong. Can we please stop that? Please, just a personal plea. Thank you. So here you have a group of people who deeply believe that fat is unattractive and makes us less valuable. And the fact that it can be prevented with self-control, a highly virtuous quality, implies that it's immoral or wrong or bad to be fat. Clearly, you just don't have enough self-control. So if you are fat, not only are you less valuable, but you are less good. The problem, well, one of the many problems with this whole narrative, is that instead of us pointing to systems and the narrative as the problem, we internalize it. We start to truly believe that we're bad, we're weak, we are unattractive, we're unworthy if we are in a larger body or not conventionally thin. And of course, when you believe you're unworthy, guess what you do? You will do absolutely everything you can to become worthy. So you try to attain your worthiness and virtue by being thin. This is why so many women spend their entire lives obsessed with their weight and food intake. Wise, loving, profound women spend their lives striving so hard to obtain their worthiness through weight loss. And of course, they have their worthiness with them the whole time. They are born with it. And worth for any human cannot be subtracted or added. It's just there. You're at full level, 100% capacity, absolutely all the time. We don't lose some when we fail. We don't gain some when we succeed. But when you're in one or more of those marginalized identities, this information is often robbed from you because of how you're treated or regarded. Our brain sees this devaluing as unsafe, understandably. So parts of us take on the role or burden of making sure we're safe. And safety looks like losing weight to a lot of people. So we strive, we diet, we obsess, we control, we fixate, we ruminate, we shame and judge and criticize ourselves because somewhere deep down we too believe our inability to be thin makes us less worthy. I have such rage toward diet culture for all the lies it told me and I obsessed over my whole life because turns out we don't have complete control over the size and shape of our bodies. Turns out dieting and restriction hurts our relationship with our bodies, with food, and ourselves. Dieting leads to disordered eating, subverting our natural ability to eat intuitively. It leads to binging. It leads to body hate. I mean, it quite literally teaches us to hate our bodies. Our bodies, one of the most inconceivably valuable instruments we were given, a vital gift without which we wouldn't actually survive. We grow to hate it when all it's doing is trying to serve us. The only reason we can hate something that benefits us so greatly is because we were taught to. All bodies are naturally diverse, and some happen to fit into that standard of what the dominant culture of power says is most valuable. So the rest of us strive and fight against our bodies to shrink them into something they were never supposed to shrink into. Dieting promised us that we had total power to control our bodies, and Dieting promised us we had total power to control our bodies when we never did. And when it made that false promise, it turned us against ourselves, when really we should have been against the lies that told us we weren't enough just as we are. So if our bodies couldn't shrink, we were the one to blame because we have complete control, right? So clearly we're just inept or worse, deeply flawed if we have larger bodies. The reason I'm going into this whole narrative and to show you how it plays out is because I want you to understand how understandable it is that breaking up with diet culture, putting down that weapon you've used against yourself for so long can be so hard. First, It's hard because of how deeply ingrained this belief system is. You will likely fight the validity of it. I know I did. Your brain might not let you believe that diets don't work, but you've seen so many people succeed, but you've had success in the past. If you could just keep it up and maintain it this time, if you could just push yourself a little more, you'd be able to crack the code, you'd figure it out. Second, it's hard to break up with diet culture because it feels like defeat, like you're giving up, like you actually don't have what it takes and other people do. Your brain might tell you you're just coming up with excuses because you are, in fact, lazy and have no self-control. Third, letting go of your thin dream is extremely painful and scary. You might have fantasized, romanticized life in the thin body. And this fantasy might have actually been a coping strategy in the past when you were steep in suffering. Leaving reality and living in your thin dream might have offered so much relief, so much joy. It might have been the one thing to get you through the present moment of suffering. Your thin dream might have helped you bear the feelings of rejection or jealousy, taking the edges off those painful emotions. Yeah, you're being rejected now, but when you're thin, then you won't. Yeah, you're not as thin as her, and that envy and jealousy feels awful, but when you're thin, you won't have to suffer in this way anymore. You won't have to feel envious anymore. When you're thin, you'll be fully accepted by others. You'll be the star of the show instead of sitting safely on the sidelines. Everything will change, and that fantasy can really help you escape the current suffering that you're in. Fourth, it's hard to break up with diet culture because we'll often romanticize not just the thin dream, but also looking back at smaller versions of us, whether we were our ideal thin or thinner than we are right now. When we think about the past, when we had smaller bodies, especially when you see old photographs, it can be really painful. This longing to go back to when you were thinner. You likely felt more attractive. You likely look back and think how hard you were on yourself and how you'd give anything to be that size now because you wouldn't be so harsh, you'd be grateful. Finally, breaking up with diet culture can be hard because letting go of diet plans and meal protocols can feel really jarring. When you're used to confinement and structure, letting go of that can feel disorienting. It's a completely new way of living. And while that way is freedom, it can feel so uncomfortable when you're not used to feeling free. It's kind of like victims that are in abusive situations who feel more comfortable being in them than being free because being in them is known. And it's comforting because it's known and your brain knows what to expect, even if it's not good. Often as dieters, we've developed a part of us that I like to call our diet commander. It's this part of us that enjoys the strict diets, the structure, and feels it's necessary to beat us down when we don't do what we're told. You might say, why would I ever want to do that to myself? And I'm not saying you do. I'm saying there's a part of you that does. And it takes this role as diet commander in our lives because it's trying to protect us in some way. Often, in our childhood or young adult years, we directly experienced or witnessed others experiencing the real pain of being fat in a culture that values and prizes thinness. Whether it was being abandoned, rejected, ostracized, mocked, made to feel unworthy, less than, or even disgusting because of your body size, these feelings create deep wounds that, when accessed, feels like we might die if we ever feel that way again. It's really hard. It's painful. So our diet commander took charge in an effort to never make us feel that way again. The problem is our diet commander doesn't yet know or believe the truth that's that you can trust your body, that your body is safe. You can listen to it. You can get to know it. You can learn and honor it and eventually respect it. Ideally, you'd learn to love and cherish it. So telling your diet commander to step down from its duties can feel life-threatening sometimes. Just like abuse victims can find freedom to feel life-threatening as well. All of these reasons, and so much more, really, make divorcing diet culture and letting go of all the false hope it gave you so hard. So how do we do it then? How do we start? How do we break up with diet culture when it is so hard? Of course, everyone's personal experiences shape their defenses that they've adapted. But I want to provide some perspectives and mindsets that might help you on this sometimes distressing journey. So take what you want and leave the rest, I guess. First, it can be helpful to think of the benefits of obtaining this freedom from diet culture, to really delight in these freedoms so you can see how life would be different and learn that different doesn't have to be scary. In fact, it can be quite life-giving. Here are some of those freedoms. First, there's mental freedom. How much of your thoughts revolve around food and weight? If you're anything like I was, it was probably like 80% of my thoughts were consumed with what I'd eaten so far, what I'd eat later, how many calories I have left, how to feel full without eating a lot of calories, how much I weighed today versus yesterday and the day before. Imagine all of that mental space being cleared. What would you do with it? For me, I've picked up passion projects that fuel my soul, like writing music, reading, and really the best part of having my mental space back is the ability to be more connected to others, connected to myself, like my feelings and my body, connected to nature actually as well, and connected to the spirit or the divine. The ability to connect when you're not obsessed with food and weight is by far the most beautiful gift I've received from recovery. Along those lines, another freedom is social freedom. No longer do I have to skip out on plans, check the menu before going to restaurants to determine what I should eat. I don't spend parties obsessively staying away from the food or obsessively being near the food. I just get to be with people, actually be with them, connect with them. It's a beautiful thing and allows me to have some really beautiful experiences that I would have missed out on in the past. Body freedom is another available freedom. For me, it's like I released the prison bars I placed on my body. Sometimes it feels like I let it out of its cage. I made my body an important, valuable component of my life. So I listen to her. I trust her. I let her feel without numbing her. I don't have to worry about what I eat because I know my body will guide me. And if I get out of tune with my body and eat more than my body wanted, or if I ignore my body a bit and wait too long to eat, I trust my relationship with my body to bring me back into attunement and figure out her needs right now. Does she need a break from food? Does she need to move or stretch or rest? Are my clothes too tight? It seems a bit odd, but I check in on my body like I'm in a relationship with her. I highly recommend having a solid relationship with your body and kind of looking at it like it's an external relationship that you highly value, like a friend. I've also given freedom to my body by removing shame and judgment because it doesn't look the way society wants it to look. Or to be honest, even how I want it to look, because I still have some fat phobia in my brain. So while I harbor some desire for her to be smaller and more fit, I can have that part of me while also having a larger part of me that is so grateful she's here with me and that can respect and value her just as she is. I have both parts. And sometimes they're in conflict. Sometimes one of them is silent while the other is super loud. And when my fat phobic part takes over, I acknowledge it. I typically acknowledge why it's being loud at the moment, which is usually because it's afraid of some past wounds being reactivated. So it's trying to protect me by being really afraid of gaining weight. And when that happens, I'll offer that part of me some compassion and acceptance and remind that part of me that I'm safe. And usually it doesn't stay around for too long. There are just countless freedoms that come from breaking up with diet culture. And I'd love to know what freedoms you've found, or if you're still in it, which freedoms you anticipate finding. But the final freedom I wanted to share in today's episode is the freedom from your diet commander beating the crap out of yourself. The freedom from shame and judgment. Your diet commander does this because it often thinks if it won't, you'll fail. And it perceives failing like dying. And being free of that criticism and fear of failure will open up your life in such beautiful ways. Your confidence will grow. Your security and assuredness of who you are will blossom. Generally, life won't feel so rigid, and failure or mistakes won't seem so dire. Not only because you won't have to beat the crap out of yourself when you fail, but because you're more grounded in yourself. And that's because you're cultivating a solid relationship with yourself. All of this work leads to this firm footing that makes the winds and waves and shifts of life seem a lot less destabilizing. So here's your invitation this week to open up your mind and body to the idea of breaking up with diet culture. Notice those fears that come up. Notice your diet commander shouting objections. Don't fight or resist them. Let them say their piece. And then keep your mind and body open to the freedom that awaits you. Both of these. The freedom that awaits you from breaking up with diet culture. Both of these parts of you can live together. Both of these parts of you can live together. And the more you keep yourself open to them, the more your true desire for real freedom can take hold. If this resonates with you and you're interested in learning more, I'd love to chat. You can schedule a free 30-minute consultation call with me at sammybcoaching.com. That's SAMMYBEE coaching.com. And we'll talk through how I can help you gain this new footing that will provide you with so much freedom that you absolutely deserve. See you next week.